I am now recording the session. I want to welcome everybody formally. It's actually been a really nice introduction and banter for those of you who joined us a little earlier. This is the 7th of our sort of post-pandemic or pandemic Business of Art programs. And I think, as many of you know, being repeat participants, this is a way that we really wanted to try and support the creative community in a moment of significant change. It's part of a 3-part artist COVID support program, which included artist grants and some acquisitions funds from the Ministry of Culture. But the training session, Business of Art, actually was started in 2017, and it's something we've done at various stages of the gallery's growth, but seemed very relevant in this moment as we're all trying to develop new skills and to keep up with this great time of change. So I was really excited to have Tanya Wigmore join us this evening. I had the great pleasure of sharing a panel discussion with Tanya, I think it was a couple of years ago now, at ICCI about her work and the power of social media and digital marketing, and was really inspired by the session. And when we were looking at speakers to really kind of help inspire our creative community and artists and give them some of the tools they needed, Tanya was really one of the people at the top of my list. So I'm delighted that she accepted and she's with us this evening. For those of you who don't know Tanya Wigmore is the founder of Chronix, a Cayman-based digital agency of industry experts, obviously looking at this huge beast of social media websites and marketing. The scope of work covers copywriters, page search specialists, marketing automation experts, CEOs, developers, and web analysts. And she's going to explain some of that tonight because I don't even know what all of that means. Tanya is very passionate about growing healthy digital agencies. When she's not coaching business owners or digging into business plans, working with leadership teams to align their goals and build momentum, she's hands-on with digital marketing teams at select agencies to improve their digital strategy and generate ROI. She sits on several local and international boards, speaks regularly at events, passionate about mentorship for those who are now just coming up the ranks. So it's a great pleasure to formally introduce and welcome Tanya to take the podium.
Oh, well, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here and to meet more people in the community who are, cutting the path and trying to figure out what is the right platform. I'm excited to be here and to talk to you about that. So what we're going to talk about today is, do you need a website in the age of social media? This is a question that I get a lot, and I'm actually happy to hear that Kay and David, you already have websites in place, because a lot of times I get that like, do I even need it? I'm really active on social. So you guys are already ahead of the curve. So what you're going to get today and what everyone's going to hear is we're going to talk about some of the benefits and some of the disadvantages of social media and websites, and how you might want to consider using the platforms in different ways to send different messages to your audience, because they're going to be interacting with them in different ways. So a little bit about me. Natalie just already gave you the full rundown. There's not much else about me, but I will ask about you. So I would like to know who already has social media platforms in place. David, you just said you had 700 people on Instagram. That's amazing. Does everyone else use social media for their own art? Yeah. Kind of, yeah. I also wanted to ask, who is using different profiles? So do you have your personal profile and then another one for your art, or are you using them all in one?
That's a huge, I have both, but that's a challenge to figure out which one to use in what circumstances. Because for my personal social media, it's deliberately a small circle. Like, it's a short list, because there are people that I know, that I've met, and that I am okay with me share. Not that I even share a lot, but sharing what I do. So when I think about, growing into a bigger business, and then you're wanting to appeal to a greater set of people that I don't necessarily want them in my personal things. So for me, the challenge is like, okay, so now it's 2 whole sets of stuff to manage. I'm like, so I got to choose to leave the personal one behind, or that, and I haven't even started that yet. I'm kind of building some of those. So yeah, that's where I see them battling each other for my time.
Yeah, that's really common. And, I struggle with that myself because I have my corporate company things that I'm trying to reach an audience with. But then I also have a slew of pictures of my children that I don't want to just like blast out to everyone because it is different things. But there is a lot to be said about bringing your whole self to everything you do. So really being mindful as you get into your social media, is this a platform that you are going to be sharing personal things on, and do you want it to share to everybody, or is this going to be more of a gallery of your work? So that's something right when you're getting into it, it's good to think about that before you get partway in and you have a mixture and you either have to split them out or you've been doing 2 and you're like, no, it's really all the same. So thinking about that at the start really helps. So anyone else have any comments on that one? Anything to pipe in before we jump in? Don't want to leave anybody out. Okay. So social media is easy. And that's the understatement of the century, because it is so hard and so vulnerable, and you never know what to post and what you're going to caption it and like what hashtags do you use. But at the end of the day, it is incredibly easy to just pick up your phone, find your image, post it, done, and you can go. Where maintaining a website can be a lot more work. And when it crashes, you have to put it all back together. And if you're rearranging things, so there's a lot to be said about how easy it is to get something up and get it out on social platforms. So there's a huge benefit to using social media for that. It can be really personal. And whether you're using it for your brand or just for your personal, getting these behind the scenes and the emotions from it really give you the opportunity to show the personality behind the product. Like what you are making is so much more than just the final version. It's all of the heart and soul that goes into it. And, all of the art that's happening, the art during lockdown, the feeling and emotion, and, the Tansy Mackie going to and finding all those driftwood and putting it together and creating excitement for what you're working on. And even what Caitlin's sharing here, where she's published in a magazine. So showing that with your personal touch and just pride in what you're doing can be really helpful to grow your audience as well, and to have it be less just like blatant promotional of your work. Social media is very passive and algorithmic. I don't know if you guys have watched The Social Dilemma yet, the new documentary on Netflix that's diving in deep into the algorithms of social media and how social media really looks at what you are engaging with and what you aren't, and then makes suggestions for you. When you interact with something, your audience sees it. So Facebook, they know what you're interacting with, what your tribe likes, and they're going to keep showing you content that is relevant to what other people like you like, which can be really good if you want to get your stuff out there, because the more that you put it out, the more other people engage with it, the bigger your reach can be. And that's for people who are, passively at home scrolling through their feed. They're not actively looking for you at that time, but they're getting trained to recognize your work and your brand. So that's really cool. And then on like Twitter, you have that suggested for you. They're looking algorithmically through everybody in your neighborhood and saying, you should follow these guys. So that's a really good way to increase your reach and your audience. And then, even in Instagram, depending on what you're tagging and what your categories are, it's a good way for increased exposure. You can advertise on social media, and I would say that your advertising dollars on social media are some of the best investments you can make. They go really far and you can get super targeted. These are all ads that I saw today for art in the community and overseas. So if you know your demographic, you can hone in pretty good. If you know that people who like your art tend to like another artist, you can target them based on what their interests and page likes are. So you can get really granular. You can also leverage, if you have your website, you can put like cookie tracking on your website and cookie them. So when they leave, you continue to show them your work as they go. So that's a good way to get your message out there and your product out there when people are not actively looking for you. But social platforms change. Did anyone have a MySpace when MySpace was a thing? No? Yeah. Even Pinterest. Pinterest was really big, and we're starting to see some of that engagement dwindle. So it can be really hard to, when you put a lot of time and investment into social media, to build your audience, curate your work, build your following, you really get it. And then if everybody shifts away from that platform, you lose your audience just like that. What about?
I wonder about TikTok now, right? Because it's so visual and interactive.
Yeah. So who here's on TikTok? Anybody yet? I saw 3 girls in a kiln. 3 girls in a kiln. They've been doing TikTok for some of their work, but it's massively, massively popular, and people are getting so creative, and a lot of it's really, really good stuff. But it really depends on your audience. So you need to know, like, where is your audience and where are you going to reach them? So just putting things on Pinterest might actually still be a really good way to reach people who are looking at certain curated lists versus being on TikTok, where there's so much more of an audience, but they're just not into it. Yeah. So then shifting that perspective. So website or social media, super easy. Take your picture, do your thing, post it, it's done. Like some things, put some hearts. But it's very fleeting. And if you don't update your social profiles, they get stale really, really fast. Where your website is expected to be more stable. So this is the National Gallery website blog posts. And these are, I believe these are on the bottom of the homepage. They're from August. They're pretty fresh. And I probably took this screenshot in August, so we're extra fresh then. And they're expected to be here. So if you're writing content, if you're talking about your pieces, if you are, talking about the process, anything else that you want to write about and have it stay, your website is a really good place to keep that, because it's not just going to disappear down the end of your feed when you post something else. So that's a really good way to keep that content. The big difference between your website and your social media is that your website's going to have more search value. So if you want people to find you for, we have a search here for mural artists, another one for portrait painter. If you're doing custom creations, if you know that somebody looking for, Caribbean art should show up, you should show up there, you're going to want your website for that. And you can see for the mural artist came in, that top listing is a Facebook page, but the rest of them are not. It's news articles, it's other websites, it's places people are mentioned. So having that website really, really helps so that you show up when somebody's looking. And like Natalie mentioned at the top of the hour, that when you have, you're talking to someone internationally and you want to show them a portfolio, you're going to send them a link to the website. You're not going to necessarily send them to social, because it might be a mix of all kinds of random stuff.
Tanya, before you go on, can I ask a question?
Sure.
And I've hidden the bar, so you can't sort of see us putting our hand up right now. But I've read a bit about website optimization, and I know it can be quite complicated. Could you talk a little bit further about that?
Yep.
I'm just going to welcome the person that just joined us and ask them to put their mute button on until they have a question. So if everyone can just put mute back on, that would be great. Over to you, Tanya.
Sure. So search engine optimization, that is the art, I'm going to call it the art of optimizing your website so that when search engines come to your site, they have a clear idea of what your website is about. So it's a mixture of putting the right keywords on the page. So if you're doing, Caribbean art for commission, that you state that on your website. So when Google comes, they see those keywords, they match it, and they know. So there's a lot of other things that go into it, but that's generally the biggest barrier I see to getting indexed and showing up in the search results like this, is that those key phrases that you want to show for haven't necessarily been included on your site. So making sure that you have good heading tags when you have the topic of the page, instead of just about, you might say about and then your name. So if somebody's searching for you, your website shows up because your name is more prominent on there. Or we could talk about, the Kaboom murals. If you are showcasing something like that on your website, you want to make sure that you have the name of what your piece is, where it is, other important things that people might be searching for to find it. For an example, when I was putting together this presentation, I wanted to find a lot of good examples of the different murals in Cayman. And I couldn't because I was searching for the mural artists, and a lot of them just didn't even show up. So if you don't have that documented on your website, you're kind of relying on other people to have done that. For this one, you're relying on the Compass to have it updated. You're relying on somebody else to have that on their website to hopefully mention your name, and then somebody will go through the effort to find you that way. Question, David.
The heading tags, I've heard of this. I've heard of the heading tags before, but where do you put them? When you're putting stuff on your website, where are these tags going?
Yeah, so when you create your page, and I can show you, I'll grab your URL after and I'll show you exactly where on your website they are or should be. But kind of think when you create a page, your page has a title at the top. So it'll be like, contact us. And then below that, it would be like, here's our address, here are our hours, here's a form. That contact us, that would be your heading tag. And that's the most important heading tag on the page. So it should be an H1 tag for the number 1 header. And then your subheader would be your H2 tag. Your subheader would be H3, and so forth.
And Tanya, just another question for me. Is repeating words on your page important as well? The more times you reference, say, Caymanian art on your various website pages, does that help the optimization, or once you've got them in those key areas, that's
pretty
enough?
much once you've got them. If you're writing in a natural way for a visitor to read it, you're probably going to hit most of those. If you start repeating them, it can start to sound a little spammy or unnatural. You want to avoid that because you want somebody coming to your site to really trust you, and that almost seems untrustworthy, right? When you read that and you're like, this sounds like spam, or like, I think a robot wrote this. When you start to have those things that don't feel natural, then you're creating potential distrust with your visitor. So just write naturally. Use, I know in my industry, I tend to get stuck in my head and use the terms that I am familiar with, like, oh, well, SEO and heading tags and blah, blah. But you got to think about what somebody who is searching for you is going to use. So people searching for what I do, they might not be looking for, SEO. They might be looking for improving my Google rankings. So just thinking about how someone who is going to be interested in what you're offering, what are they going to search for to get there? Your websites also give you control to showcase and organize your work, just like you would, put together your pieces and curate them specifically in a gallery or anywhere else. You can do that on your website. On your social media page, it might just be all a mix match. Sure, you can do your different photo galleries, but somebody coming to the page, scrolling through your feed, might get disjointed noise all over the place. So on your website, this is where you can keep, historical works. You can tease new things that are coming on, and you can really decide what you're going to put together which can be a really good way to identify, maybe it's your section about the 18 whatever war. Like we all tend to work on certain pieces that go together, so you can present and showcase them that way. So what I do in my day-to-day with most of my clients is, traffic and getting found is good, but most of them want some sort of conversion. There's some sort of action that you want someone to take when they come to your website or visit your social media. But when you have someone coming to your website, you have a lot more control over what that action is going to be. So on your social page, you can have like an instant message, or maybe click to website. But on your website, you can get really specific and you can optimize it. So if you are selling something and have, the most basic conversion example you can think of, where somebody purchases it, they pay you money, you ship them a product, you can do that on your website, where you can't easily do that on social media without sending them again to your website. You can also do commissions that are more lead generating. So if you were doing a custom, a series of custom pieces, and you knew that there was demand, you can use your website for lead generation. So putting forms on your website, if you're running workshops, if you have upcoming events that you want people to maybe not register for, but to be put on the list for notification, that's aces on your website. You want to make sure that your website has somewhere that people can contact you, and you are, with GDPR compliance, collecting their information so that you can reach out to them with upcoming whatever they might be interested in. So once people think, maybe I should get a website, first question is always, how much is that going to cost me? And really, it could be from as low as $12.50 a month up to $20,000, $40,000, $50,000. It really, really depends on what you want your website to do. Or for a lot of visual artists, where you are just showcasing your work, it's very gallery based. It's not necessarily like really interactive with features. You don't need a lot of dynamic things going on. You can often go with one of these like simple, cheap sites and have it totally cover all of your needs. Most of them are pretty drag and drop. So you just pick the template you like, upload your images, and you're done. Easy peasy, no coding experience required. But you will want to watch with your storage for these, because a lot of them, they're like, it's so easy, but your storage space is so teeny tiny that if you're uploading a lot of images in your gallery, you can max that out pretty quick. So keep an eye on that. This pricing is for a platform called Wix, but there's also like Squarespace is really affordable. WordPress is affordable, but usually requires just a little bit more technical skills. Or you can start, moving up into more robust sites like WordPress is really easy to use, and just kind of go from there. So it really depends on what you want to showcase and what you want that site to do for you. So when you are building your website, there's a few things that you want to have. You want to have an about page. Just like your social media is about showing the emotion, the process, like everything that goes on to it. When someone's buying a piece of art, they want to know about you. They want to know who they're supporting. So making sure that you have that on there. You've got to have a contact page. You want your form, you want, you don't have to have a phone number, but you can, but make sure somebody has a way to contact you. We have found actually that the instant message chatbots are filled out way more than an actual contact form, but you don't need to have 24/7 availability for that. You can just use it as a form. So when somebody chats on it, they're like, hey, are you there? And you're like, I'm not, but if you leave your name and email, I'll get back to you. Or you just lead right away and be like, hey, welcome to my site. What's your name? Be like, my name's Tanya. And they'll be like, what's your email? This is my email. They'll be like, so happy to hear from you. I'll shoot you an email tomorrow. And then you have their information so that you can go back to them. You absolutely want a photo gallery and your portfolio, because that's what you are presenting. That is what this is all about. if you have custom prints, you know, things that people can order, if you do private commissions, you want to have that information on there so people aren't guessing. Put your social media feed in. That's a really good way to keep your website fresh. So you don't have to update it all the time. Just show like your Instagram feed in it so people can see a lot of that, you know, personal happening all the time feed, but it's not like you're not always updating your website. And so IRL means in real life, your work in real life. So it's really easy just to have a flat gallery of like, these are all my prints, but to show it in somebody's home, to be like, oh, here's a picture of Tanya doing a webinar, and you can see this is my custom lion photo that we took, and to highlight it in people's homes and to show your happy customers with it and to put their testimonials to, you know, because a lot of art is about that feeling when you look at it. So to show other people that mimics the feeling that you want your potential new customer to have, it just helps to create that, all the happy feels that can help lead to conversions. And that's it. So easy. So I'd like to welcome some questions, because I'm sure there's a few things that, you know, maybe sparked some interest, or maybe you're like, no, Tanya, I don't think so. Feel free to call me out. David, what you got?
Don't want to hog the whole thing. So a few things I wanted to ask you. First of all, Pinterest. You mentioned Pinterest. I have a Pinterest page. I don't really know how to use it in terms of sharing that with other people. That's one thing. And the second thing I wanted to ask you was about blogging. So my website has a blog page. I don't really sit and write loads on a, you know, on a daily or weekly basis, but when something interesting happens, I'll tend to put something on there. Are blogs a good way to generate interest in your website, you know, and your artwork? So really, Pinterest and blogs, what I wanted to ask you about.
Yes. Yes and yes, and both for the same reason, but in different ways. So Pinterest, Google loves Pinterest because you've probably noticed in most of the search results, I'm just going to stop sharing here and I'll make wild hand gestures. In most of the search results, you'll have like your ads at the top, if there's any ads, and then maybe like one listing, and then you'll see an image, like different relative images, right? And then it moves into more organic listings. So Google shows image search results in a lot of their search results, and they're hungry for all the images they can find. And a lot of times Pinterest is well optimized for that. So even when I was doing, you know, different searches for this presentation, there was a ton of Caribbean artist type.
Tanya, I'm just going to interrupt. Can everyone mute their mics? Let's see who that is.
I got it.
Perfect.
Oh, sorry. There we go. So adding things to Pinterest and creating different Pinterest boards and categorizing those, putting good descriptions in, they help you show up in the image search results. So I would say most traffic that I've seen to and within Pinterest is people actually coming in from Google. It's not people on Pinterest being like, gonna scroll through my Pinterest feed. It's people who are finding those images in the Google search result. And then for the blogs, same thing. So on your website, you know, you have your homepage, about page, gallery page. You probably only have so much content to put on those. So having your blog where you write about different pieces, different experiences, changes in whatever is going on in your life and your process, that writing about those can help give you more different ways for people to find you when they're interested in whatever you're talking about.
I wanted to ask, I guess, chat a little bit about YouTube, because I like it. Just a few words. It's really, it's gained a lot of traction. It's very interactive. And I think, especially for people that are trying to create something, like you were saying before about bringing people along with you when you're in the process, that sharing, having like a YouTube channel, which then you can drive traffic there, but also share links to those videos onto social media. So I like all of that. I'm sensing though that YouTube it's starting to have some challenges of its own, right? With the amount of content, how they punish for monetization, because if you decide, hey, look, I want to drive a revenue stream from there too. It might not be a lot, but I want to get something. It seems a bit of a challenge in that way. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, so YouTube is the second most used search engine. Like, people are on YouTube all the time. And you don't necessarily think about YouTube as a search engine, but it is. And people are just like searching, they're watching videos all day. So that's a really good place to be to get some visibility. So the key to YouTube is that you want to make sure you have a really good description, because when somebody's searching the keywords, it's still the words that match like what the title of your video is, what the description of your video is. So if you have a transcript, put that in there as well, so that you have better relevancy, and then just share it everywhere. So you want to share it on your social pages, put it on a blog post that you're putting on the site, embed it everywhere it makes sense, because the more views you get, it's algorithmically based, right? The more views, the more interactions, the more it's going to recommend it and show it. Another really good trick to use with YouTube is to build lists. So you can make your own lists of your content, other people's content mixes. And then when somebody gets any video that's on that list, it just rolls through the rest of the things that you've put on that list. So if you're curating your list to include a lot of things that are super popular, you can create those rabbit holes for people to get stuck into, which is a good way to get more views on your videos too.
Tanya, I'm going to jump in with a question or a couple of questions of my own, if that's okay. I wanted to jump back to the blog for a minute and talk again about, are there protocols on how frequently you should blog? Is it like once a week if you really want to keep that optimization going, or a couple of times? I know social media has its own kind of suggestions of, not more than twice a day, not overdoing it necessarily. But the blog side of things, I'm very interested in, because of that optimization and being able to bring in new content and new potential search words and things like that. So that was question number one.
Okay, so let me write them down. How about I answer question number one, and then you can ask question number two,
go for it.
or I'll forget it. Okay. So for blog frequency, you really want to think about what you have energy and capacity for. So if you commit to like 6 blog posts a month, but you really are only able to do 1, you're just going to make yourself feel really terrible and like a failure every time you get that one out there. So set a realistic expectation for yourself, and then you're going to feel like really good that you've got it. Like, yes, 1 blog post. Just for content freshness, I'd probably aim to do 1 a month, just so when someone's coming to your website and they're checking it out, it looks okay. So when I went to the gallery site to take, that screenshot of those recent blog posts, they were all within, 2 or 3 weeks. But if I went to the website and the recent blog posts were 6 months out, then you're like, well, these aren't really recent. And you're already like, have you been doing anything? Maybe you're not working. Maybe you're like, traveling and not doing anything productive right now. People start to fill in the gaps of what they think you're doing. So I would try and shoot for 1 a month. But if you can do more and you have something to say, go ahead and do more. But I wouldn't post just for the sake of fresh posts, because if you're just, I like to call it verbal diarrhea, if you're just like, and there's nothing really of substance there, people aren't going to want to read it. So you want to make sure that you're still providing some quality content.
And as you just mentioned with YouTube, you can do a combination of written blogs and then filmed blogs, right? That's fine to kind of move in and out.
Oh yeah. So if you're taking this presentation, for example, we have it on video, we could pull the audio, we could transcript it and make content. We've covered a bunch of different things that we could easily pull out into smaller content pieces. We could maybe write like 6 blogs about what we've covered today and just go into each of those in more detail. Take some of the slides, make them into a picture, then you have something for Instagram, take video snippets for social. So anything that you're doing that you can repurpose and just, you know, massage to fit different ways and to get the maximum mileage out of your content, go for it. Like, you're putting in a ton of effort for that one thing, get the most out of it. Keep going. Don't stop there.
That's amazing advice, actually. You're right. There's so many different ways it can be presented. So that's really great food for thought. And then my other one, because I know the other questions from the audience, is when we were looking at conversion and using the site as more of a way of building revenue potentially going forward, whether you had, I know it's been a challenge sometimes in Cayman for online commerce, e-commerce and things like that, particularly in Cayman, even with PayPal has its own challenges sometimes here, although I think that's been fixed. Are there platforms or are there a few out there that people could do some research into if they wanted to do begin expanding their own e-commerce?
Yes. So first, I would caution that e-commerce in the Cayman Islands tends to be just unnecessarily expensive. So most of the platforms have monthly fees and then per transaction fees. So if you're not doing a regular sustainable volume, probably hold off on that and, you know, work with your people to do, you know, a wire transfer or whatever else you need to do to transfer those funds. Because what you're spending in wire transfers, you're going to easily spend on just maintaining a payment gateway. But if you are doing, you know, a fair amount of transactions, and I can't even give you a dollar amount of what that would be, that's something you'd need to figure out on that one. There are quite a few. There's Latitude 19 is one that you can do here. There's First Atlantic Gateway, which is one here as well. The one I use for my e-commerce is 2Checkout, which you can integrate with, have funds deposited to Butterfield as well. And then there's Cayman Gateway, which is the new kid on the block. And they actually have like a good physical presence here. So I know that they've been picking up a lot of clients. Go ahead, David.
All over the place. Just to backtrack a bit there. So these things that you're talking about, Latitude 19, 2Checkout, and Cayman Gateway, these are, what are these? These are things that you can use in order for people to make payments to buy things.
Yeah, these are payment gateways. So you know how, like, I want to say the rest of the world, but that's not true, where you could just like put PayPal on your site and take payments that way. You know, if Natalie, if you're right, if they've changed it and you can now pull funds from PayPal to your Cayman bank accounts, that would be amazing. But the last time I checked, you couldn't. So you need to find a payment processor that will take somebody's money, put it in your holding account, and then allow you to take it to your Cayman bank account. And because Cayman does a really good job of maintaining a lot of our restrictions to make sure that we're not doing shady money laundering, they go above and beyond with compliance. And a lot of them, you cannot bring money into the Cayman Islands that way. So, you know, those are the 4 that I know of that you can use if you want to do transactions on your site where people just like do credit card and then it gets deposited into your bank.
And Tanya, you're absolutely right. I meant even paying out with PayPal used to be blocked in
Oh, really?
from Cayman, and that seems to be working. But say the National Gallery uses First Atlantic, but it is very complicated, and I would agree with you that I'd caution artists with smaller revenue turnover that way to potentially do it through wires and the old-fashioned way, because of these monthly costs. They can really add up, and it's something we've sort of looked a lot at for our own gallery retail store and things like that. I just want to welcome a couple of people that joined us late. And while we do have a recording of today's seminar, we've got 5 minutes left. If you do have a random social media or website question, you weren't here for the beginning, Tanya's covered loads tonight, so your question will probably still be relevant if you would like to ask it while we have her here for 5 more minutes. We have been learning a lot, so it's been great. And welcome
Tanya, Tanya, could I just ask you, you mentioned cookie tracking. Could you just tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So many websites now, when you visit them for the first time, you'll see that little notice that's like, hey, we use cookies. Do you accept? And you're like, sure. Or you decline them, whatever. So most websites do use cookies. And for most of them, it's for totally good purposes. So if you use Google Analytics on your website, Google Analytics is a totally free tool to use that collects, I want to say user data, but that sounds really sketchy. It collects data of who is coming to your website so that you can see what pages they're visiting, who's following through your conversion path, who's leaving, where in the world they're coming from. And it's all anonymous data, but it allows you to get really good ideas of who's coming to your site and what kind of numbers, and you can get a lot of data from that. But even that uses cookies. So if anybody's doing any sort of tracking on the site, you're going to have cookies for that. Some websites use them to improve user experience. One platform that we use is called HubSpot. We use that like WordPress, like Wix. It's what we put our website in. And what we can do with that is that if I know that you're visiting me from the Cayman Islands, but I can't, so my business is in the special economic zone, so I can't service anybody in the Cayman Islands. So I can just change that content to be like, hey, let's meet up and go for coffee and talk about marketing, but not be a hard sell. But if you're visiting me from the United States, it might be like, did you know that you can blah, 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 hard sell. So that would be cookie based as well. For advertising, what you can do is have these cookies on your website. So when somebody visits, they get a cookie. And then when they leave the site, that cookie goes with them. So if you're using a tool like Google Ads, where the Google Ad network reaches 90% of people on the internet, Google sees that cookie and they know where that person has been. And they pull ads from their pool of advertisers based on where that person has been and will show them ads. So if you've ever been on a website and then you leave and then you see those ads all over you everywhere, that's what's happening. Okay. And Facebook and that they were just like, yeah, I think maybe a mother-daughter bathing suit sound where they thought this came from, but they'll just start showing you things because they
Okay, brilliant, thank you.
All right, well, we've got a couple more minutes. I'm losing my connection a little bit, so I'll hand over to Tanya as co-host if we have one more question.
Remind us taglines on somebody else.
Too, Natalie, I don't what these things actually are. So what I'll make sure that you get a copy of that. Yeah. And send me last questions.
I'm hoping you guys can hear me.
Well,
very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tanya. I'm so sorry
Thanks,
I dropped
Natalie.
out there at the very last minute. I hope it didn't interrupt your session. But a huge thank you, everybody. And we'll send the recording out shortly. Tanya, thank you so much for a great evening.
Thanks, Natalie.
Thank you, everyone, and good night.